Hey nerds, I'm talking about the penultimate episode of Season 3 of Star Trek Picard, Episode 309, Vox. I'm going to review the episode and then get into a spoiler breakdown of the episode, starting now. Welcome to the Nerd Social. I'm Nathan. I'm coming to you solo this week because we didn't get our screeners until Monday. So David and Chandra will hopefully join me next week for the final episode of the season. So this episode is written by Sean Tretta Kiley Rossetter, and it is directed by Terry Matalas, who is the showrunner of the show. The spoiler-free logline of the episode is: a devastating revelation about Jack alters the course of Picard's life forever and uncovers a truth that threatens every soul in the Federation. The final battle begins as Picard and his crew race to save the galaxy from annihilation, not without a gut-wrenching cost. So this was, for me, it was a really good episode. I know that it might rub some people the wrong way because it has a lot of people are calling member berries in it, but I think it made sense logically. I think that this whole season was very well structured. The revelation that comes in this episode isn't out of left field. It's something that has been hinted on, but they misdirected you from time to time. But I think that what the revelation is behind Jack is hinted at in various forms throughout the season, and how the whole conspiracy has been laid down is also has been hinted at throughout the season. I'll get to that when I get to the breakdown of the episode. Like I said, I think the season is really very well structured. This episode moves at breakneck speed because there's like revelation after revelation in this episode. There's 5 scenes in the first act and 7 scenes in the second act because they're just short scenes that just are kind of like info dump, trying to connect the dots from the previous episodes in the season. So it was really satisfying connecting all the dots and seeing how the whole plan came together, the whole changeling plan came together in this episode. So, and as always, the cast of the show is doing really great work. Patrick Stewart, Ed Speleers, everyone in this cast is doing exceptional work, and everyone gets a shine in this episode as the crew is working to piece together what the conspiracy is. So yeah, it was a really satisfying episode, and I don't think I can put it as high as episode 5 for me, maybe because the member berries weren't as strong, some people might say, but I think I would rate it a movie marathon. It's that good. I think I can definitely watch it over and over again. And of course, for preparing for these reviews, we have to watch the episode over and over again, and I've never tired of analyzing it and breaking it down and watching individual parts. And some parts were very comforting to a person like me who's been a long time Star Trek watcher. So yeah, anyway, it's difficult to talk about this episode without actually talking about the specifics. So if you're enjoying the review so far, please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, makes the algorithm happy, and helps other people find our content. With that, spoilers ahead. Alright, so I have screenshots of this episode, and we actually start where we ended off from the previous episode with the door. So Jack and Deanna are talking about the door, and Jack is saying that he remembers the connection to an arboretum, and we hear this sound here, and I actually took a minute to actually look it up. This is actually the song that we heard in the first episode of the season, The Next Generation, on Chateau Picard. It's the song I Can't Stop Crying by Will Grove White. Our love affair. And we hear it again here in this corridor. I actually figured this out a couple days ago before I saw the screener on Monday of this week. I think when we talked about this last, I was thinking about the paw rapes, but putting things together from the previous episode when Vadic was on the bridge and she says to Seven,
"How fitting it is for you to stay and witness this."
It's something that I missed when we were reviewing it, but something I realized during the weekend. So this revelation wasn't shocking to me. It all made sense. And of course, the conversation that precedes the revelation from Troy opening the door of Jack saying these vines are connected, and it seems not just comforting, it seems right, it seems perfect. These are all hints to the revelation. They don't waste any time getting to here in the teaser when she opens the door and she sees the Borg cube. She runs out of here. She doesn't tell Jack what she saw, but she goes to the sickbay and tells Picard and tells Beverly that she saw the Borg cube. So then we begin the first act here in the sickbay, and this conversation actually starts with a voiceover from Locutus from the episode Best of Both Worlds at the end of season 3 of TNG. You hear,
"I am Locutus of Borg. Resistance is futile."
in the background at the beginning of this scene. So Picard remains haunted by the experience here. He is in disbelief. He says that the only thing that he passed on to Jack is Aromatic syndrome. And again, this is something I think we mentioned in previous reviews. Like, it didn't make sense that it was Aromatic syndrome when that diagnosis came down. We've been questioning it for a while now. When we saw 2 episodes ago, it was obviously not Aromatic syndrome. This diagnosis, of course, happened in the last episode of TNG, episode 26 of season 7, All Good Things. It's ironic that Beverly is the person who says here that you never had Aromatic syndrome when she's the one who diagnosed him. Although there is some wiggle room there. She did say that it could be a lot of different things.
It could
cause you to be susceptible to several kinds of neurological disorders.
And one of them could have been aromatic syndrome, and he came to her saying that it was aromatic syndrome with information from the future. You could say that she didn't necessarily misdiagnose him. She just used some clues that he gave her from the future to fill in blanks, and they happened to be wrong. So he says that he has to go and tell Jack. He says that it's my fault. Again, he's feeling the weight of the thing, and he's blaming himself as if he's the one who has infected Jack with this, even though he was a victim. Which I feel like he should have evolved on this, because season 1 of Picard, he started to realize that X-Borg or XBs are victims, but he still feels guilt from the ordeal. So we have this conversation with Jack, and it's also interesting when he rings the door, Jack says come, which is the thing that Picard would say all the time in TNG when someone rang the door to his ready room. Anyways, so the conversation goes as you would expect, with Jack being a little bit annoyed that his went to his brain and didn't tell him what was happening. And then we have this conversation between the two of them where Picard is basically telling Jack things that he already knows, that 35 years ago he was assimilated. That episode was actually in June of 1990, so it was actually 33 years ago for us. It was actually 10 at the time. So he was assimilated, and apparently he was changed, and there was a seed that was passed on to Jack. So these two scenes, the scene precedes this and this scene, are probably the longest scenes in the episode. And then there's just a bunch of quick cuts from scene to scene as like Jack makes the decision that he's going to fix it himself, and that starts a chain reaction of scenes that are very quick, where we get a lot of information one after another. But I think this scene actually needed to breathe, so I appreciate that they took the time for them to sit together. And you can see that I really like the staging of this. Look at the distance between them here. It's like a chasm. And even in the middle of this conversation, Jack is like, look at me, what do you see? He feels like he's being abandoned by this person who he thinks didn't want him in the first place. Yeah, this scene was very well written and also acted by these two actors. And Picard says, I came very close to killing everyone I loved because I was controlled by them. But Jack feels betrayed. This is his father. Picard is just going to a research academy in Vulcan. They mentioned something here, but it doesn't really register with me. There is a Vulcan retreat that in Strange New Worlds, the Pring is stationed at something called Ecostone, but that's not what they're talking about here. They say Tesla or something like that. But anyway, Jack knows what it is, and he says that it's an institution, a prison, where they can mind meld or lobotomize the Borg Academy. And he also shouts back at him that he said he would never give up on him. Anyway, so yeah, we have these ensigns, security, holding him. He takes control of the ensigns here, and then in the next scene, his mother begs him not to go because he's going to get killed, but he doesn't really pay attention to her because he thinks he's going to go and kill the queen, which is ridiculous. He thinks he's going to be able to get close to her, kill her. He turns off the transponder on the shuttle, and he gets away. This I feel like he got away a little bit too easily. I don't know, was he able to control every single person who was in front of him? I guess they cut that because this episode isn't that long. There's a lot of information in it. So he senses where he needs to go. Then Picard says that he inherited the best of you and the worst of me. But Beverly says that she's not going to give up on him, and she's going to try to find something. And this is this very touching scene between Data and Picard, where Data says, would you like me to say something comforting? And Picard says, you might find that impossible. And he says, I know. And he just puts his hand on his shoulder. And then they get summoned to the sick bay by Geordi at the end of the scene. The next scene, we have Jack going to where his senses told him to go to. And the computer says that there is a tachyon radiation pulse. And he says, is it a wormhole? And He says no, it's a transport conduit. And of course, transport conduits related to the Borg. We found that out in the Voyager, and we saw them in the first season of Picard as well. And that's where the act ends, after the Borg Queen reaches out to him and says, Jack. So again, act starts with this debrief in sickbay with the entire TNG crew here. We start to see the unraveling of the plot here. The new genetic code was written into Locutus 35 years ago. That's the anomaly that Soong found, Data says, and that's also why the Changeling stole the body from Astron, is what Worf says here. And Picard says that's why I could always still hear them. And if you remember from First Contact, he was hearing the Borg in his head in that movie.
What?
I can hear them.
And Geordi says that you were a receiver, but your son seems to be a transmitter. And Worf says that they stole the body to weaponize it. And Picard asks how could they receive his signal because they weren't assimilated. And we find out, of course, later how that's done. And they know that all the Starfleet elite is gathered in one place for Frontier Day. And this is where the plot will be hatched by the Changelings and the Borg. And he asks Shaw to go to the Sol system. And then we get another cameo here that this ship is being flown by Admiral Shelby, which again is another reference to the June 1990 episode Best of Both Worlds Part 1. We were introduced to a Lieutenant Commander Shelby, a very ambitious Lieutenant Commander Shelby. And in that episode, she was a rival to Riker, and you can see now that I guess she rose up the ranks, and she's talking about 250 years ago, the Enterprise NX was one of the first Warp 5 capable vessels. So this is, of course, a reference to the first episode of Star Trek Enterprise, Broken Arrow, and Archer's crew. So we see Shelby here. Like I said, she obviously continue to rise up the ranks very quickly because it looks like she's a admiral that outranks Picard. And then we jump to a scene back on the Borg cube, and this is just a very quick scene with Jack walking around and then the Queen saying welcome home. Shelby in the next scene continues to talk about the Frontier Day festivities and new fleet formation and the synchronization technology. And it's funny, Riker here says, there it is right from the mouth of Admiral Shelby. And Picard says, irony, she's endorsing something so Borg. If you remember from Best of Both Worlds, she was the Borg hunter. She was the one who came up with all these ideas for how to destroy the Borg. So it's ironic that she would be endorsing this technology that's so Borg-like. So Sydney says we've reached Sector 001, and that's also another reference to First Contact. The battle of Sector 001 was the battle at the beginning of that movie with the Borg when they destroyed the cube and they were pulled back in time. And then we get back to the Borg cube, and then we have the conversation with the Borg Queen named Jack. There's back and forth about his name, and he says, I'm not your child, and all that stuff. And she calls him or names him Vox because Locutus was the one who speaks, and Vox is the actual voice because he's the transmitter. Again, I think he's a little deluded here, thinking that he was going to be able to kill her. If there's all this Borg stuff inside of him, why wouldn't there be something inside of him stopping him from killing her? And she basically says as such, if you could kill me, you would have already. And then he's basically turned into the transmitter. So this is the other shoe to drop. So this is what I was talking about earlier when I said that this is very well constructed. This whole season was very well constructed. This is the part where we find out that the whole plan from the changelings was to put this code into the transporter so that every time someone is transported out, this DNA, this Picard DNA is written into their DNA. So they're basically being assimilated. And that's why on the Titan, the transporter chief was replaced. Of course, the changelings are replacing lots of other people in the chain of command as well to get, I'm sure, the fleet synchronization working. But I think there was question about why someone so lowly, and this is the reason why someone so lowly, the transporter chief, because the transporters was key to their assimilation plan. They've added this to every transporter in the fleet. And in the previous reviews, we mentioned this as well. The transporters was going to be something important. I think the last review of the review a couple weeks ago, we mentioned this. There were several mentions of the transporter, not just Jack seeing the vines in the transporter, but also Vadic saying that she didn't want to go in the transporter, Commander Rowe saying that
I don't even trust the transporters on the ship.
So the hints have been there the entire season. They've been subtle, but they've been there. So in the next scene, this is where the automation system takes over the Titan and they don't have any control. And Picard sends out a message to the fleet that it's still being processed when the connection is lost and the signal is being sent from the Borg cube. And Seven feels it first. Next shoe to drop here is that this only affects people who are under 25 years of age. So mostly the ensigns or the lower ranking officers, which is convenient because it leaves all the older folks from the TNG era and the Voyager era free of influence, but also they are also targets by these ensigns and these lieutenants. Jacques speaks to Mora, he doesn't respond, and then Sydney is obviously assimilated as well, and then Geordi says locate Lalandra, and Lalandra is also assimilated. So yeah, it's pretty bleak here. They have to fight their way off of the bridge because these are now drones now who have no control over themselves. And Geordi acts a little emotionally here, but it is, what are we going to do? Well, we have to get a plan first. And that's the end of the act. And then Act 3 starts with this interblip here and Shaw asking why we weren't assimilated, and Seven saying, judging by all the gray hair, I'm guessing it's skipped a generation. So yeah, then we get this broadcast by Captain Ben Passat. This is actually voiced by Nolan North, who is a prolific voice actor and lots of other things, but he also voices a lot of different characters in Lower Decks. One of them is Lars Lundy, one of the lieutenants on the Cerritos. So he gets free, this captain, broadcasting on 99 Delta, but they put his ship in the front of the fleet just to destroy it. He was captaining the Excelsior, which we've seen various versions of that ship in Star Trek past as well. But this gives Shaw an idea to go down, use 99 Delta as a maintenance channel to go down to the maintenance deck, and that's where they rendezvous. In this quick scene, the Borg is basically telling him that the Armada has been added to the Borg, and Starfleet is now Borg. So they get down to the maintenance deck and they meet everyone else, and they say that they're going to use a shuttle, and Seven says that the robot's right, that the shuttle is autonomous, and Data is like, not a robot, kind of look on his face. And this is probably a part where people are going to be very upset, where Shaw lays down cover fire so everyone can get into the shuttle. There's this quick joke with Geordi and Data saying, I hope we die quickly. I feel like that's a little bit of the lore personality that's been merged with Data. So yeah, Shaw has Beverly go, and then Picard go, and then Shaw shot, and he dies here. Picard doesn't want to leave him. Rafi and Seven stay behind, and Shaw says, the cod is yours now, 7 of 9. He actually gives her the respect that she's been asking for the whole time here by calling her 7 of 9, and then he dies, which is probably going to upset a lot of people because he's become a fan favorite this season. And this final scene of the act, Esmer here as the voice of the Borg says that formation complete, and they're going to target Space Lock. This new Space Lock that we saw in the first episode of the season is probably going to get destroyed. It's planetary defenses. And then in Act 4, which is going to excite the most people who are TNG fans, they get back to the Fleet Museum, and Geordi has a bit of surprise here that the Enterprise D, looking the best that it's ever has on film here, and they're surprised, and Geordi says that we retrieved it from Viridian 3. Of course, in Star Trek Generations is when they crash landed it on that planet because of the Prime Directive, mentioned lots of times within Star Trek. And then Geordi says we obviously can't use the E, which showed up first in First Contact. Worf saying it wasn't my fault. I guess this is a nod to him being captain of the Enterprise E at some point in the past, but that's information I don't really expound upon. I guess everyone knows. And then we get the most nostalgic thing here. Lights. This is actually looking better than it ever did in TNG, because I don't think that these had individual light sources. These, I think, were all lit at the same time and cut out in the past. So they redid all of these panels for this scene. But yeah, this is, for people who have been complaining about the lighting on the show, this is the most well-lit bridge that they've had on the show so far. It does make it look weird, their uniforms. It's hard to tell whether or not they're wearing yellow or red. He's a captain, apparently, and he's supposed to be wearing red, but it looks like a different red than the red that Riker's wearing in his uniform. Anyway, there's some changes here. Worf saying that he preferred the Enterprise E additional phasers and torpedoes, possibly because the Enterprise E was his ship, whereas he was in command of this ship. So it's another nod to him being Captain Worf, I think, here. And then Data saying, hello, chair, the chair that he sat in for 7 years. Picard says here that he missed the carpet, which is another joke. And the other thing that we hear here is that the computer is Majel Roddenberry, is the old computer voice here, who was Roddenberry's wife. And it says now under command of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, because it has the old systems in. And he says, I accept the field demotion. And then Troy says, Jack, Alondra, and Sydney, they're all family too, and will follow you. And we hear a couple nods here to TNG. Picard saying, make it so. And also at the very end here, he's saying, engage. And that's how they end the episode. So very satisfying for people who are big TNG fans, but I think it's also very coherent for people who just dropped into this season. I think that the pieces fit together pretty well, and if you don't know the references to previous things, that's why you watch YouTube videos like this, to get the references to previous things, but you still aren't lost by things in there. It wasn't like an enemy that came out of nowhere. They mentioned the Borg earlier in the season, so it makes sense that they're reconnected. And also the show is called Star Trek Picard, and it was always going to come back to things that are important to Picard. So things like the pod race, like we were talking about, or I think there were some discussions online about some like old TOS villain that it could have been. Armis, someone suggested it was Armis, like from the Skin of Evil, where the thing that killed Tasha Yar. That's a Tasha Yar thing, it's not a Picard thing. The most significant thing that happened to him is being assimilated by the Borg and him nearly killing all of civilization. And this is him almost nearly killing all of civilization again, indirectly through his son. So it comes back to Picard. Anyway, so that's what I think, but we want to hear what you guys think. So please comment down below, like, share, and subscribe, and check out our last review or check out one of our reviews of The Mandalorian. All right, guys, bye. Thanks.